Welcome. We know you have many choices when choosing your professional development activities, and there are some really amazing opportunities here at the University of Arizona Global Campus and beyond. We're really happy that you chose us today as the UAGC Department of Education and Liberal Arts proudly presents to you Ed Talks. I'm Dr. Jessie Upshaw, and I'm honored to lead the Professional Development Committee of the Department of Education and Liberal Arts here at the UAGC in the College of Arts and Sciences. I'll be your host this afternoon. Today marks our fourth session in the 2021 Ed Talk series entitled Multipliers, and it's inspired by the study of the work of Liz Wiseman and her New York Times bestselling book, Multipliers, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter. Here to explore and extend Wiseman's concept of the challenger with her story is Dr. Tamecca Fitzpatrick. As you listen to Tamecca's story, you might listen for your call to action to share your practices to support a culture of leadership and the multiplier effect in your own classroom or your interactions with students and colleagues. Or perhaps you'll find a way to introduce a new practice that her story or our discussion sparks for you. Tamecca, will you come on camera and say hello as I introduce you?
Hi.
Thank you so much. Dr. Tamecca Fitzpatrick obtained her Ed.D. at the University of North Texas, where she served as a diversity scholar lecturer. She has also served as an elementary classroom teacher, professor, both online and traditional, a program chair, an advanced ed chair, and a member of the Board of Trustees at St. George's Independent School. Dr. Fitzpatrick enjoys contributing to the field of education by sharing information and resources with educational leaders and aims to promote a continued growth, dialogue, and the application of learning. Tamecca resides in Tennessee with her family, their dog, and their 2 cats. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you.
I'm now going to ask that we remove our videos so we can get started after a few brief reminders. Next slide, please. As a reminder, Ed Talks are fashioned after TED Talks, the ever popular way of sharing personal stories for only 18 minutes of monologue. We do this because we want to hear your stories, and we can best do that by sharing our stories. Our goal here is not necessarily to teach you anything new, as you are already an expert in your field. Our goal is to perhaps motivate you to try something new in your approach to helping your students succeed. Our storytelling approach is geared to not take a lot of your time, but rather to simply set the stage for an interactive conversation and perhaps encourage you to encourage your students in some new way. At the end of our Ed Talk today, we look forward to hearing your story and what you are doing or will do in your classroom or educational setting. After Tamecca's story, we will invite all participants to share your reflection and practices. So with that said, audience members, if you could please hold your comments and chat to the end as we listen to Tamecca's story. And with that, let's get started. Tamecca, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. So as we start, I will ask you to consider the questions that you see on the screen. So if you will, just sit back, relax, and listen to this Ed Talk on the multiplier effect. Again, thank you, Dr. Harkins, for that beautiful introduction, and thank each of you in attendance for joining me today. The picture that I want to paint today is, in fact, a picture of my own life. So a life so similar to a roller coaster with ups and downs. And sometimes I sit in the front row and prepare for the drop before others even know it's there. Other times I sit in the middle, forewarned by watching the reactions of those in front of me, while sometimes I like to ride in the last row with time to decide if the drop-off is worth a scream, a grimace, or even a reaction. And since I'm here with you today sharing this view of my life, it's obvious that my roller coaster ride is not over. My view of the events in my life is influenced by the seats I select on the roller coaster. Sometimes the events are unexpected, but I will always know that it is the unexpected that keeps things interesting. So I'm going to ask you to remember something as we chat today. Hopefully you're ready. And for the next few minutes, I would like for you to remember that a roller coaster's loops are never circular. Like any good roller coaster ride, I have met many people as I've constructed what would become my own roller coaster. as I've waited in line to board and selected my seat to prepare for the excitement that each ride is or was sure to bring. And every once in a while, I've even exchanged a smile with the attendant as they walk by to complete their safety check. But wait, have you ever realized that as you age, the attendant rarely comes by to check your seatbelt or your shoulder harness? I kind of wonder if they figure you have enough experience to know how this works. And if you don't, well, evolution. Well, I hope not. But do you conduct safety checks with your students in your classes, or do you assume that they know how the safety measures work? So if you're just tuning in mentally or physically, it is likely that you are thinking, is this a story about an actual roller coaster at an amusement park? And again, no. I just personally look at my life as a roller coaster. And this perspective has allowed me to understand that each peak and each valley is temporary. Sometimes the ride feels like the old rickety wooden rides, warped by extreme conditions. And other times, like the steel roller coasters with the versatility to provide a more comfortable ride. Many roller coaster enthusiasts will say that both still provide a thrilling ride in their own right. But did you remember that a roller coaster's loop is never circular? So for me, that means even when it seems that I'm going in circles or spinning my wheels, I am never actually returning back to the exact same spot. But why? What impacts my movement, my trajectory, and my interpretations of those peaks and valleys? For me, it is a direct relationship between those on the ride with me and what I learn from each person and each movement. You see, I'm what I call a labeler, and that's not always a good thing. But as I moved through life and welcomed or invited others to ride my roller coaster, I found it helpful to assign seats. I guess you can kind of tell by now that I was a previous elementary teacher. So I like to be able to identify individuals by names. And while the actual names of the people in the seats have changed throughout my life, their characteristics and the roles that they play have remained the same. So today I'm going to talk to you about the people who occupy my Challenger train car. Liz Wiseman, author of the Multipliers, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter, defines challengers as those who define opportunities that challenge people to go beyond what they know how to do. And so for me, the first riders in my Challenger car are going to be my parents and my nuclear family. As the daughter of a single mother, it was clear that my mother challenged most of the individuals on her roller coaster. But for some, those challenges were too great. And unfortunately, the challenges that she presented to her husband, the father of her children, it created a tense environment because he was an individual who struggled with sharing his own capabilities in a way that could keep up with her expectations. And so, as people do in theater, and as they disembark from a roller coaster, he made the decision to exit left. A decision that would not just impact my mother's roller coaster, but the two additional roller coasters that were under construction, mine and my sister's. So according to Liz Wiseman, challengers do four things. They take the extreme question challenge, they create a stretch, they take a bus trip, and they take a massive baby step. So in the extreme question challenge arena, we know that a good leader will ask a question and let her people figure out the answer. A concept that for me sounds similar to the Socratic method, which by definition is a cooperative, argumentative dialogue between individuals based on asking and answering questions to stimulate critical thinking and draw out ideas and underlying presuppositions. And while many of you believe that Socrates is the originator of this particular approach, I am of the opinion that my mother created a cultural derivative of the Socratic method. So now I have a rider under the influence of Socrates. Well, that's a joke, but while my mother's line of questioning sounds quite impressive to anyone within earshot of a conversation, my sister and I were fully aware that on my mother's roller coaster, the Socratic method is always accompanied with a side of sarcasm. And while she stops just short of giving a directive that showcases how much she knows, we were fully aware that her questions always led to a predetermined epiphany where she witnessed an unsuspecting child discover that their car had just arrived at the station on her roller coaster ride at the exact expected arrival time. So remember, a roller coaster ride is never, you guessed it, circular. So do students enter and exit your course at the exact same point, or does their interaction with you propel them forward? You see, on a roller coaster, the cars are not self-powered. A standard full circuit coaster is pulled up with a chain or a cable alongside the coaster track. The potential energy accumulated by the rise in height is transferred to kinetic energy as the cars race down the first downward slope. And through my mother's parenting, I was either being pulled up by the chain or cable or using that transferred energy in my response to the downward slope. The operative word here is slope versus spiral. Do you positively impact your students' trajectory? Do you help them in the slope, or do you simply stand back and witness the spiral? So, Liz Wiseman tells us that there are 3 practices of challengers. They seed the opportunity, they lay down a challenge, and they generate a belief in what is possible. As a 16-year-old entering a new world after graduating from high school, my mother's roller coaster served as a model as I constructed my own roller coaster and decided who would and would not be offered a seat. This framework helped me see my personal needs, challenge my assumptions, and reframe problems, all while providing scaffolding, using what I'd learned as a darter to the problems I would face and determining a starting point for when and how I would go out into the world as an individual. I've been able to apply so much of what I learned from the challengers in my life in this past year. And the seats on my roller coaster are not simply reserved for individuals. There are also spaces for life events. For example, if you'll indulge me for just a little bit longer, I'll explain what I mean. In April of 2019, I was planning for my then 14-year-old daughter's birthday party, an event where our family and friends were welcomed into our home to help celebrate her trip around the sun, or in this case, another ride on her roller coaster. Then my only concerns were if I had enough food, enough space, enough time, well, and the proverbial party question, will the kids have fun? But if I fast forward to April of 2020, I'll explain why this time period was a challenge for me. My desire to hold on to what I thought was a normal celebration presented a need that I had never considered previously. I wanted my daughter to feel celebrated and acknowledged on her birthday, which happened to fall during the early weeks of a not fully realized pandemic. I mean, after all, according to the news, she would be back in school and able to celebrate with her friends in person by the time her actual birthday arrived. But needless to say, the need to celebrate safely remained. And so her father and I originally assumed that she expected the large-scale events that we had hosted in the past. But after a conversation with her, we quickly realized that that was a false assumption, and that as a family, we could reframe what we perceived as a problem and create a new starting point. So how would we celebrate was our concrete challenge, one that we were able to address by asking the hard questions collectively and allowing others to fill in the blanks. For example, how could we involve family and friends both near and far? And more importantly, What did my daughter need to feel special on her special day? Given the opportunity, others were quick to fill in the blanks. And truth be told, I had never given anyone the opportunity to have a say in my children's birthday parties. Pre-pandemic, I always started planning early, and I personally decided every minute detail down to the birthday outfits. But while learning from the challenge of a pandemic, I was amazed when family and friends and even neighbors provided suggestions that we had never thought of. Yard signs, Zoom parties, drive-by parties, birthday deliveries. I mean, who even knew these things? So the pandemic provided a great practice for me in helicoptering down. And again, I must admit, I was very uncomfortable with this view, especially since I'd always worked extremely hard to perfect the children's early birthday celebrations. And in the recent past, appreciated the luxury of hosting memorable celebrations while on autopilot at a 30,000-foot view. My party planners always knew what I expected and what I was willing to pay. So aside from submitting payments, I was out of the active party business. The pandemic, however, made me take the challenge back to the ground level. I once again had to work hard, or should I say actively, to see a path that would allow for all of our needs to be met. But I was also able to see that there were so many people on the same roller coaster track with my family. Some people were even in our actual family roller coasters cars. And I never really realized how fantastic some people were until I was presented with what I thought was an overwhelming problem. So together with the help of so many people, we co-created a plan that we could all believe in. And we did understand that while a traditional party was not going to be feasible, we were able to collectively create ways of avoiding tackling too many problems at once. So a really good friend helped me realize that not everyone needed to celebrate in the room together, and even reminded me that dedicated time for grandparents and friends separately could be ideal. A sentiment that my daughter reaffirmed when she was able to spend more one-on-one time with people. Another even provided details of a local sign company that placed celebratory signs in your yard late at night so you wake up ready to start the celebration. So I'm going to be honest here. I have never prayed for patience, ever. And that's partially because in my mind, in order to develop patience, I would have to be willing to address the same thing over and over again. Instead, it has always been my personal goal to learn my life lessons the first time they're presented. So needless to say, many of the things that I learned in 2020 carried over to how I celebrated my daughter's 16th birthday in 2021. Again, did you remember that a roller coaster's loops are never circular? And thank goodness for that, because those things influence the motions of my roller coaster. You know, with that in mind, I hope that I do not ever experience a global pandemic as unprepared as I originally faced this one. But I am extremely grateful for the opportunity to pause and learn this life lesson the first time. The pandemic was a challenge for me and so many others, but it also provided an opportunity to reflect on the impact that I have had up to this point on the 2 roller coasters that I am helping construct. It provided a real opportunity to take personal inventory and ask, could I be both a challenger and a know-it-all? And if you're not familiar with her work, Liz Wiseman casts the know-it-all as the accidental diminisher of the challenger. So while as a parent with roller coaster experience for so many of the peaks and valleys that my children will face, is it really helpful for me to showcase what I know or ask the questions that allow my children to understand the challenge so that they can direct their focus and energy to getting on that roller coaster and enjoying the ride? going to bring it back again. Since a roller coaster loop is never circular, I want to be sure that I co-construct or ride the roller coasters of those around me, that I'm adding value. I also want to be sure that I apply the information that I acquire in a way that benefits my interactions with others, especially my children. So for me, it's important to keep the qualities of a challenger in mind. And again, Liz is going to tell us that in order to do so, we must take the extreme question challenge, we must create a stretch, we must take a bus trip, and take a massive baby step. And, my children are now old enough for fewer words and more actions. Now, I know that sounds a little odd if I just said that there's an extreme question challenge, but Liz suggests that we speak to our children in the form of questions. That means no statements, no directives, no orders, just questions. And since mine are older and they've had experience of years of being asked questions that promote critical thinking, I look forward to them now using those types of questions that they're used to for their own problem-solving approach. And in doing so, I hope to create a good stretch by telling less and asking more, by challenging them and rewarding the experience. So at the beginning, I asked you to remember that a roller coaster loop is never circular. And I now like to add one more thing, and that is ask for more and you will get more. I'd like to end with a riddle. And the riddle is, I am free yet priceless. You can't own me, but you can use me. You can't keep me, but you can spend me. Once you lost me, you can never have me back. What am I? If you said time, you are correct. So thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope I've shared something that will help you spend your time as a multiplier, more specifically a challenger in the lives of those around you, especially the students that you serve. Thank you, Dr. Harkins, and I'll hand it back over to you.
Wow, Tamecca, thank you so much for sharing your story or taking us on that ride, if you'll let me continue the metaphor. You've really set the stage for that multiplying mindset that has me reflecting on how I can be a leader as a challenger with the students and be like that attendant as I check the seatbelt of all my students as they enter the classroom, whether they're in the front row, the middle, or if they're preferring the last row on their roller coaster at this point in time. They might not know what to expect, but providing that safe space is like a seatbelt, and I can guide them by setting up the track as a challenger, and for them to come out of that loop, like you said, in a different trajectory than they entered, while supporting them through that click, 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 click of the climb and the big drops, each corkscrew, and then the exit to their next ride. If you'll forgive me the metaphor as well. Audience, Tamecca posed some really great questions for us to consider here as we reflect on our own practices and as we look through that lens of multipliers, specifically the role of the challenger. As we open up our chat lines to consider your takeaways from today's story, let's frame our discussion. What are you currently doing in your own practice to support your students' success as a challenger? What are you inspired to do next? As Tamecca says, what seat are you filling in your students' academic lives? How are you influencing the trajectory of the students you serve? What type of attendant are you? Do you do a safety check? Please start sharing your impressions, your ideas, or perhaps your new approach in the chat. Or we would also love to hear from you. To share with us using your own audio, please simply raise your hand using the hand icon on the bottom of your screen. You'll then be given the opportunity to unmute your microphone and share your story or your reflection that way using audio. We invite you to join the conversation and to inspire others with your story. I know listening to this story, Tamecca, I am inspired especially by the piece of asking the right questions. That's one of those challenges that come about in multiple facets when facing students, whether it's in the classroom or supporting them outside of the classroom, and how you can go from telling them what to do to asking the right questions and helping to support them on their roller coaster ride. So that part really spoke to me. And I just think about all of those ways that we can do that, whether it's in our instruction, whether it's in communications by email, phone call, text, whatever way that you're communicating with students. Feedback. Feedback is not just a telling opportunity, it's that opportunity for asking the right questions. That part just really spoke to me.
Thank you. Exactly. And I'm seeing some great things in the chat, some suggestions of what those safety checks look like in our classroom. How are we supporting our students? And something you just mentioned, we're giving them feedback. How are we checking that they're positively benefiting from that feedback? Are we giving them those opportunities?
Tisha mentions here that, providing a phone number and ways to reach out beyond just emails and then the classroom is a wonderful example of a safety check. Lauren shares here, she does her safety check each week on Mondays, posting an announcement asking students how they're doing in the course or just life. And I think that's so important in that building relationships piece with our students. It's not just the content, it's supporting them as they're building their roller coaster professionally. And, as a fellow human being, as they're trying to learn from others in the course and from us. And as challengers, we can ask those questions. Maybe no one else has stopped to ask how they're doing this week.
Right. I was sharing with someone earlier kind of this topic and this approach. The original post, it was something that I did in 2012 where I was on a roller coaster with my children. And I was like, this reminds me, it's very symbolic of life. And somebody said, well, why don't you say a train ride? And I said, well, if you've been through this academic field, you understand that like you can get on at the station and you can think, oh, I'm supposed to be done with my bachelor's at the end of 4 years and my master's. And you have these time frames, but you forget that life also plays a role in that. And so for so many people, it really is like, you are here, you have this one life, you get to determine, kind of where you end up. But a big part of that is really, as instructors, supporting our students as they're having those difficult times. Are we modeling for them that everything is not always going to, go as planned? And what is a plan? So yeah.
I love how that challenge extends to those types of skills beyond just in the classroom as well. Kelly mentions here the concept of balancing scaffolding for students that need it and inspiring and pushing other students who are ready to go for it. And that really speaks to, when I hear scaffold now, I'm also going to picture your roller coaster, the wooden coasters with the scaffolding, that we can build different supports in and making sure that we're meeting them where they are with those questions. Some students might need us to go down a little bit on what types of questions, but providing support even when we're extending beyond and challenging students gives them that safety net of the seatbelt.
I love this one. I can't see the full name. I think this is Dan, but it says a seat buddy. And that is a concept that I absolutely love. I think we have some really good programs when we talk about our mentoring and, making sure that our students don't feel isolated. So we want them to be independent. We don't want them to feel isolated. And so this idea of a seat buddy is absolutely fantastic. That could be extremely helpful for our students. And so being sure that we're reminding them, how can you either, benefit from a mentor or how can you serve as one? It's a really good one.
Nina shares and seconds some of the things that we're talking about with asking those critical thinking questions within the content of courses, but also checking in on them. And I love that she uses the word journey here, because that, this roller coaster is really a journey, and where are they at and where are they going to end up when they come out of that loop and hitting that trajectory for the next challenge and the next goal they've set.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of praise for your metaphor, Tamecca.
Thank you. I'm trying to read the chat too. Some great ideas in here. I really like this idea too. I'm sorry, Kate Kimball said a call or a FaceTime. For some of our students, really, it is just knowing that there is someone there who understands what that process looks like. I love that suggestion. It's one of those at graduation, we just had the opportunity to connect with our students. And for so many of them, actually just that human connection, is inspirational. I love that idea.
It's so true. Nina brings up also that this is an opportunity for us to be a challenger when we're noticing a student falls behind. That's that beautiful piece for those here at UAGC, the Signals platform that we have access to, but just being aware of students that whether they reach out to you or maybe they haven't, maybe it's you go in to do grades and you realize, oh wait, I didn't hear from that student this week. Those opportunities to use that check-in and challenge in that way as well.
Mm-hmm. I love this. For some, their hands are in the air, and for others, they are white knuckling the ride. And knowing the difference and being able to meet them where they are and offer the level of support that they need as individuals. Fantastic.
Holly shares one way of implementing a safety check is sending a note when a student misses a discussion. Just that reach out and knowing that you're there as part of that scaffold. That it's not just, hey, I've noticed, and what can I do to support you is always an opportunity to challenge and support.
Here's one more that I just love. Holly mentions there are often emotional barriers to success. And that really is kind of what role are we taking with our students? Are we sitting there watching them spiral? Or are we letting them know the systems that we have in place that can provide support beyond content? Are we letting them know about the wellness center? Are we, connecting them with that idea of a buddy? Maybe there's someone in their area. Are we letting them know, when we have inclement weather or we have holidays? Are we letting them know that we're here for more than just the academic portion of who they are as individuals?
So true. Kathleen, I see your hand is up. I'd love to hear you.
I was just, as you were talking to me, I was thinking of two items, social capital and human capital. We all have the social capital with who we interact, but as an instructor, we need to remind ourselves that we need to share our talents, which is our human capital, with our students and help them along on that roller coaster. So I appreciate the connection that you're making for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Seeing lots of great suggestions here in the chat. I'm behind. I'm catching up here from all these great ideas. Debbie shares connecting a safety check to asking about students' emotional barriers. So taking that one step further and seeing which barriers are in the way of their success, and just asking them by asking a question: what challenges make you feel worried? How can I best support you? Versus just looking at what excites them. Of course, we want to know their goals and the things they're excited about, but also being a steward for safety, as Debbie coined it. I love that. Thank you.
I saw two things too I think we have two Dr. Stewarts in the room, and one mentioned kind of the tone in the communication and how it impacts the response. And the other one mentioned checking in on our peers. And I think that the Ed Talks are a great opportunity. Sometimes when I'm sitting in Ed Talks, it can be one of those days where you're just not really feeling it. You're like, okay, I'm going to meet the requirement, but I'm a little overwhelmed myself. And so I think there is value into checking in with each other, so that if we're supporting each other and we are feeling supported, it can really translate into our interactions with our students. So thank you both, Dr. Stewarts, for that.
Timothy shares with us just an opportunity at the midpoint for a welfare check for both academic and personal check-ins. And, that's going back to your analogy, Tamecca, it is like usually every roller coaster has your thrill and then you think it's almost over and then you go again. So that midpoint is a really good spot for just a blanket check-in too, just to make sure everybody's doing okay, a little individual reach out. Thank you, Timothy, for sharing that. That's one that's easy to implement. Set a little note on the calendar. Dr. Kelly, Olson Stewart shares, and opening an email with "I am worried about you," rather than just going right to the "you did not submit," just varying the way in which we respond and the way in which we approach our questions and our supports. It can make a world of difference. And just even putting myself in that position, if someone opens with that safe space, that safety check, you know that there's room for growth. And we know through Maslow's and a variety of theories that if you don't feel safe, you're not going to be in a place for educational opportunity. It's not a learning opportunity. But if you feel safe, you're more likely to be able to grow from the experience and move forward. So what type of attendant are you? I would love to hear it. Are you those that check in on everyone? Are you an attendant that just watches to see who needs it and allows the others to check their own seatbelt? Tamecca, I want to revisit that concept of trajectory too, because I think that is a really important one, especially related to what I learned, that a roller coaster loop is not a precise circle, but just envisioning that going in and building the momentum allows you to come out changed from where you were when you came into an experience. And on our classrooms, I think we can look at that from every lessons standpoint. We can look at it from the beginning of a course to the end of a course, or the beginning of a program to the end of the program. And I think that looking at that big picture of the trajectory that they're on and supporting to make sure that each student has that opportunity to come out changed from the experiences is so important.
Yeah. I love this one. Agreeing with feelings of the students removes the barriers. I do think a lot of times, when we on Tuesday morning, that is usually on Tuesday morning when you open your email and you see, I had this and I couldn't do that. Validating that, I made a joke once that if I were an Ashford student, I'd be worried about every grandmother and every pet I have, because it seems that always kind of impacts their ability to do their work. And I should say UAGC now, but it really is one of those where, when we think of our why, something that in the College of Education, in the DIL, we think about a lot. What is our why? Is our why to propel our students forward, or is our why to pinpoint them down to, you are not telling me the real reason? And if our why is to ensure that they are academically acquiring this knowledge, then are we going to spend so much time trying to investigate the validity of their excuse? Or are we going to do kind of what was mentioned earlier? Leave the door open. Someone said, when they get a late assignment, they will email the person and say, the door is still open. I think that is a great way of letting them know, deadline may have passed, we are still here. It lets them know that their participation is important. And I really do think that, when we're talking about really helping people and propelling people forward, just the way someone probably did for us, that is really going to be important. Our students can't just think we're looking at our deadlines and we're wanting them to, fill in the blank. We are really wanting to engage with them in a way that is impactful. I love it.
And it goes beyond just in the classroom. Paige mentions here that she's pulling valuable information into this as a student-facing support professional, being behind the scenes and implementing some of these opportunities with just interactions with students outside of the classroom. Going back to what has been said over and over again from participants today, this goes beyond academic content. This is that support throughout their goals, no matter which interactions they're having at an institution of higher education. So thank you, Paige, for sharing that.
Yes. I'm sorry, you guys are probably witnessing my squint. I should have on a reader, but instead I'm like trying to squint to read the chat. My safety check would be put on a bifocal, but
I think Dana mentions here, for people who did a great job checking in and buckling up, we can tell them that excellent job and keep them excited for the ride of what's coming and keeping the confidence going. And I think that's a really great way of scaffolding and adjusting our differentiated approach to what students' needs are. And then they're actually turning into that model for those around them. That's a really great point, Dana. It does look like our conversation is kind of dwindling down, and all good things must come to an end. Before you go, though, please do watch the chat box. We are going to go ahead and share a link. Tamecca, if you can go to the next screen, please, to our Ed Talks homepage, where this recorded Ed Talk can be found. You'll also find in that link, you'll find that link in the invitation that you joined today's meeting in. At this place, you can download certificates of participation, and you can access all previous Ed Talks in case you missed one, and you can revisit this one as many times as you'd like. Just ride that roller coaster over and over and over again, as my children like to do. We do want to acknowledge the work of Liz Wiseman and her Multipliers book one more time for the inspiration for today's Ed Talk. Tamecca, if you can go to the next slide, please, as well as the rest of our series coming up this year. And speaking of that next session, please do come back and see us next month on July 15th, same time, same place, where Dr. Frank Uvari will share with us a story of being a debate maker. You don't want to miss that one, trust me. We thank you for joining us today. Huge thank you to Dr. Tamecca Fitzpatrick for sharing your story and inspiring our next steps or our next ride, for supporting our students and each other. On behalf of our Dean, Dr. Tony Farrell, and UAGC's Department of Education and Liberal Arts, we wish you a safe, healthy, and impactful June, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, everyone.